Second.
My thanks to Senator Thune for yielding and to you for presiding over the balance of the day. I am here with sadness, not for the first time, and tragically not for the last, I fear, because I am here to speak to the decimation and destruction of veterans' services, ongoing in real time, right before our eyes, affecting real people in their daily lives. And it is a tragedy and a travesty because the people affected are our nation's heroes, whom we all say we respect, but in practice right now, Elon Musk and Donald Trump have launched an assault to degrade and denigrate. Donald Trump has called veterans suckers. Elon Musk shows the same kind of disrespect in the cuts in hiring, freezes, and reductions in amounts of research, a panoply, a tsunami of cuts in both resources and workers that are essential to the VA's functions in providing health care, as well as PAC Act benefits that veterans have earned. They deserve them without delay. And this assault on veterans is unprecedented in our nation's history. We had a hearing this morning in the VA committee on various pieces of legislation, some of them probably positive in the effects that they may have if we pass them. I have co-sponsored some of them and will support others, but their meaning and effect will be absolutely eviscerated if these cuts, including $80,000 workers, in addition to the 2,400 already fired, are in fact discharged in the future. The plan that the Secretary of the VA has stated, it's his word, plan, is to fire 80,000 workers. It's his goal. He said it in an interview, and I ask that that interview be made a part of the record without objection. Thank you. But we did learn in this legislative hearing that, in fact, there is no plan. The 80,000 worker target for firing is in the absence of any plan. It's the target, it's the goal, it's the intention. Fire now, plan later. No plan, no metrics, no methodology, no strategy for right-sizing the VA. Now, we know a right-sized VA needs every one of those 2,400 workers who have been discharged now. It needs every one of the 80,000 that are targeted in the next few months to be fired. And we learned this morning that there are, in fact, open positions, 36,000 of them, including more than 3,000 positions for doctors, thousands others for nurses, thousands for the custodians who maintain the VA healthcare properties. We're talking about real people who will be fired, who are on the job doing essential work right now, and we are talking about discharging people when there are open positions, a need for more doctors, nurses, and others. How's that going to work for recruiting? not so well when the VA is firing exactly the people whose positions it is trying to fill. That is absolutely a disgrace, and it will be seen as a disgrace by anybody wanting to serve in the VA. We also learned today that the VA is focusing on legislative measures that will make it easier to fire people, that will more readily enable it to discharge people without stating a reason, without a performance-related reason for firing them. So we are seeing the biggest attack and assault on veterans' access to care and benefits, at least in a generation, maybe in our history. And Trump and Musk have already fired more veterans than any administration before now. But the numbers fail to adequately tell this story, because it's a story of heartbreaking loss as a result of heartless decisions, loss of health care on a timely basis, loss of benefits, fear from people who have earned the right to security when it comes to health care, or the PAC Act. Over the weekend, there was an article in the New York Times that described some of this real impact going on right now. A VA clinical trial for treating advanced cancers of the mouth put on hold. A VA supply technician whose role was described as critical, fired. A vet center office manager fired, leaving therapists who should be treating patients using their precious time sitting at the front desk to check in the patients. Talk about waste. What we're seeing in real time is not just heartless, heartbreaking firings and deprivation of care. We're seeing waste of talents and time that cry out for action. And in fact, we are hearing that cry from thousands of constituents of my colleagues from all around the country. This chart shows where we have received complaints and stories from people. Some of their words are here. Please do not let this administration take all of this away from not only me, but thousands of other veterans in my similar situation. I'm a spouse of a 100% permanent and disabled veteran with 2 young kids. I'm scared to fight back and have them target me to eliminate my job entirely, so I just have to take it to protect my family's only income. The VA provides the veteran community with excellent health care in my area, and anything done to devalue that care or its facilities would be detrimental to the veteran community. The blue represents the states that we've heard from. Almost every state in the country, some with many different complaints, but all of them expressing fear, apprehension, and anger at what they see is the looming additional cuts in care coming to their communities. This administration, very simply, is failing to put veterans first. Let me tell you about a veteran who knows that it's failing to put him first, a veteran on the West Coast who shared his story, quote, "I lost a part of my foot serving this country, and now people with 0 military experience are gutting the benefits veterans have earned," end quote. And he continued, quote, "If it were not for the VA, I would not have been able to be in a position I am now. I own a home, and I am able to manage my anxiety with therapy and medication. He was homeless in 2012. He would go to the library every day to search for work. He was not receiving any VA benefits. He didn't know he was eligible. Once he knew about it and he signed up, and the health care and disability benefits began, he was, quote, propelled into success, end quote. He was able to rent an apartment, purchase a car, get a job, all thanks to the VA. In quotes, all thanks to the VA. And his final comment was, please do not let this administration take all of that away from me, but thousands of other veterans in my similar situation. He knows this administration is not putting veterans first. What I was hoping to hear in today's hearing was a call to action. Well, we didn't hear a call to action. In fact, we didn't even hear from the Secretary of the VA, who has dodged our questions, refused to answer them, who has failed to be transparent with our committee and with members of the Congress. I was hoping that he would be there, or at least that he would be invited to a date certain. But none of it happened. Instead, the agenda included legislation that attempts to make it even easier for the VA to fire employees. It ignores what's happening on the ground, ignoring the illegal mass termination of those 2,400 VA employees, with tens of thousands of firings now in the works. That's no way to put veterans first. It is illegal, it is unlawful, it is reckless, and it is morally repugnant, because it involves breaking promises. A great nation keeps its promises, as we promised to veterans, that we would provide for their health care, that we would give them the benefits of the PAC Act, that we would care for them after they were exposed to toxic chemicals, that we would give them skill training, job assistance. All of it now potentially ended, at least for a lot of those veterans. Because it's a funny thing about service. Difficult to provide service in an empty office with an empty chair behind an empty desk. Service really does consist of people helping each other. Veterans know it better than anyone, because peer-to-peer veteran programs work better than any other kind. And it's one of the reasons why it's important that 30% of the Veterans Administration workforce are themselves veterans. They help each other. And it's no accident that many of those provisional employees who were fired, they're the ones who were fired first, are veterans as well, because they're coming out of the service. And they're looking for meaningful and productive ways to help other veterans. I am introducing this week a measure called Putting Veterans First Act. And essentially, it's a comprehensive effort to stop the bleeding. I'm quoting the Commander-in-Chief of the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Stop the bleeding. Put pressure on and stop the bleeding is what he told us in one of our hearings. And the best way to stop this administration from actively robbing and rolling back our recent bipartisan accomplishments, canceling contracts critical to the implementation of the Dole Act or the Deborah Simpson Act, firing thousands of workers critical to the basic functioning of the PAC Act, from the schedulers who connect veterans to care or the claim staff who process those PACT Act claims. The best way to stop the bleeding is to put veterans first. Number one, hire back all of the veterans who have been fired. No matter what the agency, hire back those veterans along with all of the military spouses, the veteran caregivers, survivors, members of the Guard and Reserve. They too serve. And hire back all the VA employees who've been fired, whether or not they're veterans or military spouses or veteran caregivers, survivors, members of the Guard and Reserve. Everyone who's been fired from the VA. And then if the administration wants to eliminate waste and fraud, let's have some standards, performance-based standards, not just you're fired because we don't need you, when in fact they're needed, but more to the point, any sort of firing ought to be based on individual performance. Nobody's arguing here that there's no waste in the VA. Nobody's arguing that there's no waste in other agencies of the federal government, any more than we would argue there's no waste in any American corporation. Everybody knows that there is waste. The trick is to eliminate the waste without throwing the baby out with the bathwater, or to use a much more direct analogy that came from Al Lippert, the commander-in-chief of the VFW. When he was wounded in Vietnam, the surgeon took shrapnel out of his arm with a scalpel. He didn't amputate the arm. Exactly the same choice faces us here. Performance-based criteria and standards, and a means of appeal for those employees who may be terminated. A means of readily bringing their claim about improper firing to some kind of appeal that is based on performance and merit. It ought to be a matter of merit, not just money, not just slashing and trashing. Merit. And then hiring to replace that person. If that person has no merit, fill the position so the job can be done because the need is there. And of course, notice to Congress, to labor partners, and impacted employees before instituting any changes to telework or remote work policies, allowing time for employees to submit reasonable accommodation requests and work to their supervisors, which would help a veteran spouse and caregiver. And I've been contacted by those kinds of spouses, like the spouse of a 100% disabled veteran with 2 kids. Quote, I've worked for the feds for 20 years. My spouse was active duty. I'm also ADA disabled myself, performed full-time telework for 5 years successfully, including pre-COVID with reasonable accommodation. The agency is re-adjudicating my lifelong disabilities and telework accommodation, even though the prior one approved had no expiration date. You know, when Trump or Musk talk about mandating returns to office, I personally love being in the office. And as a former prosecutor, I think being in the office makes managing a workforce easier in some institutions, but not all, and not for all employees, and certainly not for the disabled veteran who wrote to me. And this employee has outstanding performance reviews, and her duties haven't changed. The only change here is the one prompted by President Trump's draconian work-to-office policy. The Putting Veterans First Act would take other common-sense Veterans First actions, such as prohibiting, and this one is really important, prohibiting unauthorized, unlawful access to veterans' data and VA systems by unqualified, uninformed tech bros. Well, we know what's happening in the VA. Elon Musk's tech bro elves are muscling and plundering their way through the VA's database. Now, you may say, what's harmful about access to private, confidential, sensitive information, potentially about health care? Well, it's an invasion of privacy. But number two, also illegal, it is potentially a monetization of your information used for Elon Musk corporations to make more money or to be shared with his fellow billionaires so they can make more money. And that invasion of privacy, the monetization and possibly weaponization of that information would be prohibited by the Putting Veterans First Act. Putting Veterans First Act. It is comprehensive, it is specific, and it makes a priority of protecting veterans and putting them first. Now, I don't want to exaggerate the chances of this measure passing in the next month. I'm very clear-eyed. I recognize that the administration will put a full court press against us, that Elon Musk will perhaps denounce it. But I think we have on our side an indomitable, undefeatable, and indefatigable force, and that is veterans. Because I'm listening to the veteran service organizations who came before our committee on prior days, and this morning, representatives from the American Legion. Mr. Coyle from the VFW, Mr. Murray. We've heard from other organizations who have expressed their concerns about what's happening at the VA. And they can put a face and voice to this issue. Their support for putting veterans first can make an absolutely critical difference. And so I want to make a plea to our veterans. You may feel you don't need it, but there's no question you deserve it. And the ones who need it really deserve it as well. They deserve to be put first. They deserve to have no fear or uncertainty or insecurity about whether they live in a state that will not be receiving the kind of benefits and care under the PAC Act, or their VA facility won't be renovated, or their doctor will be gone, or nurses will be missing, their positions unfilled. They deserve to know with the kind of certainty they have earned. And we all talk about our veterans as heroes, which they are, but let's put our money where our mouth is. Let's be measured by what we do, not what we say. And I'm extending an arm and a hand to my colleagues across the aisle to join me in this comprehensive bill that guarantees veterans what they have earned and what they deserve against someone whom we didn't choose. Nobody did, except Donald Trump. Elon Musk is unelected, unappointed, unconfirmed, and his Doge boys are depriving our veterans of what they have earned. We can't lose hope or energy. We can't abandon our veterans. We can't surrender in this battle. Our veterans have served, and they can continue to serve by helping their brothers and sisters make sure that the Veterans Administration puts veterans first. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.